The first order of business is old business, a consideration of August 25
Oh,
minutes, which we don't
I put
have.
that on there just in case
Yeah.
Paul did submit minutes, but we have not received those yet.
So we'll wait till we receive those to
Next month.
meeting.
Look, I couldn't find one, I don't know why.
Item number 2 is new business. The first item is public swimming access in North Belgrade. And Anthony was kind enough to give us some information on the 2 public swimming access places we have in Belgrade, which is a Long Pond off Lakeshore Drive, and at the Center for All Seasons on Great Pond. And it seems that the select board is interested in possibilities of additional public swimming areas in North Belgrade.
So Pat, what you have here in your little packet are a couple of pages from the town's comprehensive plan. And of course, you guys know that Pat serves on the comp plan committee. And so in that, if you turn to the back page of these 3 pages, you'll see that one of the recommendations from the comprehensive plan is to seek an opportunity in North Belgrade for waterfront access, that is public access to a swimming area. And so much to her credit, when she ran for the select board, Barbara Allen read the entirety of the comprehensive plan, and as a North Belgrade resident, I think was sort of struck by this and brought it up at a recent select board meeting, and the select board said, quite rightly, that, well, this sounds like a matter for the Lakes Committee just to start discussing. So Barbara, you want to talk a little bit about sort of your thoughts on this matter?
Yeah, as Anthony said, I was struck when I read the comprehensive plan and saw that Belgrade has 56 miles of frontage along the lakes, 5 different lakes. And we have 2 small swimming areas. The Long Pond is 50 feet.
Right.
And the one at the Center for All Seasons is opposite the marina. It's really, and it's used throughout the day, Monday through Friday by the day camp. So there's really not a lot of public access to it. For swimming, it seems to me that that's a better place to put in small boats than, to really hang out and swim. There used to be a public beach in North Belgrade. Well, it was private, but it was open to the public, called Cook's Beach. That was just off Horse Point Road, and they closed that for various reasons. And I've noticed a number of times this summer, I see the same group of 3 kids walking up Route 8 with wet towels and swimsuits coming from Spalding Point, presumably swimming at the boat launch. And we have had a few calls at the town office of people noticing kids swimming and concerned about the safety of using the North Belgrade boat launch as a swim area. So,
Plus, there's a big sign, several signs saying, swimming prohibited.
right,
That's IF&W signs there.
right.
It's on Salmon Lake.
That's on Salmon Lake, yeah.
Yes.
So I just wanted to raise the issue. There are, a number of ways that this could happen. As was mentioned in the comprehensive plan, maybe somebody would donate some land. There are still some large tracts of land off the Horse Point Road. I don't know if any of those property owners would consider, deeding some to the town. The situation with Camp Bonazine, of course, has been much in the news, and there are several other groups in the area that are looking for lakefront access. One is the Great Pond Yacht Club. They, of course, would need to be on Great Pond because that's where they race. The other is Seven Lakes Alliance, and they would be interested, since they do lakes and land, as everybody knows, they would be interested in having more access to both. And so it's possible, one option might be to put together some sort of partnership with those 3 entities, and maybe even with IF&W, if it would include a public boat launch. There's always need for another boat launch if anyone uses the boat launch on Sahagian Road on the weekends, you know how long wait it is to get your boat in or out. So it just seemed like this was time to bring up the issue. And there are 3 lakes within the bounds of North, well, not the bounds, but within the neighborhood of North Belgrade, Great Pond, Salmon Lake, and Messalonsky. So if we're only talking swimming access, we could talk about, we could look on any of those 3 lakes. If we want to do, more of a partnership, at least with the Great Pond Yacht Club, it would have to be on Great Pond. So I don't have any answers, but I didn't want to ask any more questions without going through the proper channels, and it turns out that this is the proper channel.
Yes.
I'm not sure what authority we have short of making a recommendation to the select board. And I certainly think it's a good idea, and my recommendation would be go find us a place. That's a good idea, do it, but it's not up to us to go scouting.
But what,
It's not up to us to go scouting, looking for land or dorms. It's really more.
but who is it up to? If it was,
Well, I think, as you've outlined it, Barbara, I think there may be a couple of opportunities, and one is just to collaborate with the yacht club and with Seven Lakes Alliance, just to see sort of where they are in the process, and what role, if any, they think that the town could play. One of the things when Barbara and I chatted about this, that I said is the town probably has the resources to acquire Bombazine. That's not, in my mind, the biggest hurdle. The biggest hurdle is how do we pay for the ongoing maintenance and operation of that property? Because not only do you have to maintain the property, especially if you're going to allow public access into it, but you've got a road to maintain, and you've got structures there that need to be maintained. I think, Pat, you said those structures are in pretty poor condition.
Bombazine may be, it's up for sale now. It's got a serious activity from buyers, so it may not be available for the town. I can let you know when.
So, and Barbara, I don't know if you know, but Pat's real estate firm is, are you,
Representing the Boy Scouts
okay.
of America.
and so they are now legally able to sell.
That's where, they should-
That's what the question is.
yes, they're dealing with their attorneys and the council to see if they can sell it.
Yeah, because I was thinking even if they can't sell it, would one option be for the various parties to come together as a coalition and take out a lease, whether it's, 3 years or 5 years, just so the property is, is used and available to the public.
I'm not an attorney, but the vibe I get from, and I've been listening to the conversations by senior Boy Scout officials at the Field Resort, is that they will find a way to sell it. They need the money desperately. For their, and that's number one.
Pat, I have a question about that. Is there any expectation about what the timeline for that is? Because I know, at least the last I heard, there was going to be a mediation between the Attorney General's office and the Boy Scouts.
I think how it'll happen if they do get a purchase and sale agreement, then it will go to that. I think once the Boy Scout executives crafting responses to offers.
What is it that's being mediated? Would be mediated.
The ability to sell.
Yeah, so the Attorney General's office, and please correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, Pat. Seems like they've taken a pretty hardline stance that they cannot sell that property unless the proceeds of that benefit scouting in central Maine.
That's kind of in the deed.
Yeah,
The
right.
original deed says that, so it's,
And so the Boy Scouts don't plan to use the proceeds in that particular way. Do they have debts that they have to pay off? Is that?
I don't know all of it, the details of, their legal,
They're hemorrhaging money.
yes. And their, and I'm not talking out of turn about the Boy Scout situation, but their membership is dropping.
Right.
And so they don't need as many places.
Mhm.
They
And so-
generally want to focus on one or two that are very active now.
Mhm. And would any of the potential buyers be interested in providing public access, or
I don't know.
is it, you know,
I don't
be interested?
represent, I don't represent any of the buyers, or Gail doesn't, so we don't.
I tell you, I'd like to see the town acquire it. And keep, because I think the town could do a lot of stuff with that that would benefit the people of town. That Scouts on. The waterfront, of course, is very valuable, a lot of things we're talking about now. They could, it's been a camp, the town could run a camp back there, similar, we lost the camp when we got the property from the Center for All Seasons. That used to be a camp, travel trailers and the like. Perhaps something like that would be feasible, and then recoup some of the money that way, charge a fee for the camp. Perhaps you can go swimming for free, but charge if you want to stay overnight at the camp.
So in that regard, Mike, there could be the potential for a public-private partnership where if the town acquired a piece of property and then contracted with some sort of private provider
Manage it back.
who would
Yeah.
manage it, yes.
Yeah, that could work. As far as dual ownership, I think that'd be pretty complicated, the town with a private entity. It's not like putting an interlocal agreement together with Rome, another municipality. It probably could be done, but I don't think it's something that could be done easily. And it certainly costs us something to do it.
The Boy Scouts do want to maintain some permanent access to that.
Right, which
You know,
seems
in
to
a
me,
much smaller way, yeah.
yeah, which seems to me would be, would take away from its value for development if
Yeah.
it's required.
That would make a big dent in development possibility.
Yeah,
In that case, I don't know what we want to do with it, whether we want to use it for camping or what, but if that's it, and we were to develop a campsite in the backland, some of that can be put aside, specifically for Boy Scouts, or Girl Scouts, or whatever.
well, I know that Seven Lakes had expressed interest at one point in using the buildings, some of the buildings to house a couple of their summer staff.
It's a magnificent spot for what you're talking about. Robert.
Yeah.
I just think the urgency of the town's going to act is very urgent. They should move, get in, because things are happening quickly.
There are a lot of things that could be done with it. I mean, this
You know,
one, we can't.
by
figure out.
others, what other interests.
What's the asking price?
I don't,
1.2.
way north of that.
North of that,
Okay, would it be over 2 million?
In that vicinity.
when we find out this was.
So it's, I don't know how fast the town can actually put it together.
Well, I mean,
Making an offer on it or.
well, but it would have to be contingent upon voter approval, which would probably not come until March.
Right,
We have a meeting coming in November. don't we?
We have an election
yeah, it would
and,
be too soon.
yeah, and I think, Mike, right now the select board is split on putting a question to the voters regarding the public water supply
Hmm.
in November, simply because they don't think the participation will be as great as it would be in March. And I feel like this would probably fall into that same category. When you're talking about asking voters to approve a $2 million purchase, which would need to be financed. I think they would probably want more people than fewer to participate in that decision. What say you, select person?
I agree.
And it really is good.
So Camp Bombazine is one possibility. I mean, it's the
Just
most
one, yeah.
obvious possibility at this point. But, how do we get the word out to other entities that the town would be interested in providing as a minimum a public access swim area for North Belgrade, which I think would go a long way toward making people in North Belgrade who don't have lakes access of their own, feel as if they are valued by the town.
Is,
I'd be happy, go ahead, Jim.
Is there an opportunity for some portion of this land to be conserved in some way that would bring someone like the Nature Conservancy in as a player that could, who acquire vast portions of land and have very deep pockets, if they could act as an entity to assist in the transfer immediately and then work as a partner with the town to reassign some of the rights to the property?
I don't know, but on Barbara's point, we have to what are the characteristics of the land you want? Do you want it beach? Do you want it, how many acres, how much frontage? If I knew that, I could show you these properties fit that.
Mhm.
You could do it by Google Earth, the tax maps. I've been on them, virtually almost every piece of property on Great Pond.
Mhm.
And Long Pond, one time or another in the real estate business.
Yeah,
It will work.
because if we're, I don't know, if we're on Salmon Lake,
Yeah, so you could go,
there could be something on
you
Salmon.
could go on
on
salmon.
Spal- another property. in
There's a
Spal-
large piece on salmon for sale now.
Where's that?
It's probably 50 acres. It's a big piece of,
Yeah.
waterfront. It's wooded.
On the east side or the west side?
It faces east, so it's on the west side.
Oh.
That might be, that's actively for sale.
Think of what that would be.
Part of a family that's owned it for many years.
I really think it's like what ought to do, if there's supporting this idea, is put together a subcommittee to investigate the various possibilities. I don't think that should be us necessarily. Here's other things.
Well, the select board passed it on to you, so.
I know,
The select board thought this would be a great use of the Lakes Committee,
Yeah, I'm
so
sure they did.
I'm happy to be involved, but I can't be involved just by myself, so.
No, I understand it. I'm
Yeah.
not saying it should. And it doesn't have to be the members of the select board. I'm just saying they should designate a subcommittee to, an ad hoc committee to do this, to investigate these possibilities.
But why not a couple members of the Lakes Committee?
That's a possibility. I just don't think I don't think it should be, committee in the whole should be designated. If a couple of the members of the committee would like to be on it, that's
I
fine.
see.
I think a couple of us could vet it pretty quickly. And then bring it back. Not that we're gonna contact the people, but these are the kind of properties that might work.
Right,
And then look at them.
right.
And then,
Because if it's just, if we're just talking about, swimming and picnicking
Yeah.
access, that's one thing, and that would be a smaller piece of property. If we're talking about including the yacht club, and that limits it to Great Pond. If we're talking about Seven Lakes, they probably would prefer to be on Great Pond.
Not necessarily. I don't
No.
know that they would necessarily. It just depends on the property.
Yeah.
We've got the great, the yacht.
Sorry?
Yacht club, sir, yacht club would love to have a piece of property.
You have to what?
Yacht, I can't talk. The yacht club would love to have a piece of property on Great Pond.
Oh, yeah, and they would have to be on Great Pond because that's where all the people have their boats.
yeah,
That's right.
So they wouldn't want to be anyplace else.
I realize that. So, I mean, they're a possibility as a tenant, perhaps, if we would require,
Right, exactly.
just like in the same sense that if we have the campground in the back, we have a manager, private entity to manage it, in a sense, it'd be a tenant,
Uh-huh.
if you would.
Well, if it's appropriate to set up a subcommittee, I mean, I would be happy to be, can I be on such a subcommittee or no?
I was just thinking, when I was at this conference not too long ago, Barbara, and they had a session that was devoted strictly to public-private partnerships.
Mhm.
There was a firm involved in building a downtown parking garage in Biddeford, and they sort of brought all the players together. And in that case, the town's contribution were some tax increment financing district funds. But I wonder if, maybe just like reaching out to an outfit like that, just to say, here's a concept, we'd like to have a piece of lakefront property. The town may be able to purchase that, but then to monetize it, lease it out to someone to manage it, either as a campground or whatever the case might be. And or leasing it to a portion of it to if it were on Great Pond, to the yacht club and to Seven Lakes Alliance, if they wanted sort of easy, ready access to the north side of the lake.
Mhm.
I wonder if that might be one way of sort of approaching it, just to see if an outfit who deals in those sort of deals thinks that that's something that could potentially work financially.
Would that be like a real estate development asset?
No, I mean, this firm, it may have been an equity firm that was, I'd have to go back and look at the presentation, but they specialized in bringing together financial players to make private-public partnerships happen.
Wouldn't Katie Cobb also be a source for that sort of information?
Venture capitalists.
Yes, exactly, Mike. So,
What is a venture capitalist?
no, I don't know that Katie Cog would necessarily play a role, because you're looking at someone who can bring people, investors in from
Okay.
the world of finance.
Let me make a suggestion. I'm sorry, did I say something wrong? Maybe I make a suggestion, that we chop this up in pieces. into one. The first part I can see is investigating the availability of lands. And what I would suggest is a subcommittee with you, because you've got real estate interest. That's the first, I always get you mixed up with Kathy.
Barbara,
Yeah, I know you're Barbara, but I always want to say Kathy. Anyway, Barbara, because she's brought it to us. I'd be willing to work with you on this. Everybody else wants to do it.
I think that's good.
The three of us to start, and Anthony.
One thing we have to consider is the neighbors, or anything we tell
Oh,
them.
yeah. I'm thinking of myself, how would I feel about
You
it?
know, we want,
right,
it's good,
I
depends
mean,
where it is, it could dramatically change their
I know,
feeling, how they are on the list.
I know, I mean, it's a classic NIMBY situation.
That's the advantage in Bombay, because they've had that situation there for years, what, 50 years, 100 years, whatever.
Yeah, I know, but the neighbors beyond Camp Bomazine are not in favor of having public
No.
access there.
No, I don't,
Vehemently against, public well, I don't know that vehemently, but
it would,
they would not be happy.
Well, that'll have to be considered, because I know myself, so if somebody was planning to put public beach next door to me, I'd be concerned. I don't know about. I'd lobby against it, but at least be concerned. I don't know. So that's still what we have to consider. That goes into the, in my opinion, the viability of a piece of property. And
that's gonna be the
one thing.
the toughest hurdle is that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we were recently at our Lake, the McGraw-Pond Salmon Lake Association recently had its annual meeting at Pleasant Point Park, which was a campground that the town acquired. Town of Oakland, yeah. And, you know, it's the perfect kind of situation because it doesn't abut any private land because of the way that, because the wetlands and so forth, you know, it's very, it's doesn't really impinge on any neighbor's property. So, you know, that's an ideal situation. I don't know how many of those there are, but, you know, of this 50-acre lot on Salmon, maybe there's some way that, you know, some piece of it could be carved out.
Take the whole thing and involve 7 lakes as, you know, land, protecting the water quality.
By the way, Saturday, 10:30 is the yacht club annual meeting. You want me to see if I can get you on the agenda? See if they're interested.
I'm not sure I'm available Saturday.
Anthony, you gonna be there?
Nope.
I'll bring it up.
Has the select board indicated what kind of a budget might be supported for an
No,
activity like this?
Not at all. Not at all. They just, I raised the issue and they said, great, turn it over to the Lakes Committee.
Yeah, I don't think we thought that far ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very preliminary.
All right. we got
Because it
enough
seems
info.
like if there was a role for the Bombazine property, then, you know, if there was a dollar amount that the town thought that they might be willing to participate in, they could explore the possibility of being a team member of some acquisition group. without knowing that, I don't know if it would be worth pursuing.
Yeah, and as Anthony said, the problem is it would have to be approved by voters,
Well,
any dollar amount.
Yeah, yes.
yeah,
So Charlie, can you hear us? You're muted,
You're
Frank.
muted.
I can hear you. Thank you.
Hey, Charlie, we're talking about the possibility of acquiring some sort of public swimming access in North Belgrade. And Lenny is here, as is Pat Donahue, who've both been involved in this, I guess, maybe from a lakes aspect. What do you think Seven Lakes Alliance's interest is in acquiring some property on that side of the lake? And what the potential interest may be in partnering with others in acquiring some lakefront property?
Like the town?
The town and or the yacht club?
The golf club?
Oh, yacht, the sailing
Yacht
club.
club, okay. I think we are, you know, I think the idea of having public access is great. And I think that we would be interested in, you know, having discussions around that. And if we have a role to play, you know, participating. You know, I think we, you know, if we could be helpful in that, I think we'd want to be, you know, it would probably be complicated. So, you know, the devil's in the details, but I think as a general rule, we'd like to be helpful.
And Charlie, would it matter to you, what lake? Would it have to be Great Pond? Would you consider salmon or Mesalansky as well?
I think anything would be, you know, open to discussion. You know, beyond that, again, it gets down to the detail. Yeah, I think, you know, one of the things we wanted to do is spread out our footprint so that we're not seen as just, you know, working in Rome and Belgrade. So, you know, to the extent that we can work on, you know, McGraw Pond, Salmon Lake, and Mesalansky, I think we're interested.
Okay.
Yeah, we're consciously trying to do more in, you know, the North Pond, East Pond watersheds, for example.
So maybe one of the first steps would be having a conversation with Seven Lakes and the yacht club. But at the same time, I don't mind reaching out to this firm that did this presentation for the town managers, just to see if, in concept at least, that this sounds like something that is feasible from their vantage point.
Okay.
Matter of fact, I was gonna ask you to do that. We were gonna ask you.
Consider it done.
I mean, Pat and Lenny, you sit on the board. Would you agree that we would be interested in at least having a discussion?
Yes, for sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Are they coming to one of our meetings?
Yeah, and I like the fact, Charlie, that it wouldn't have to be Great Pond, that it could be another one of the lakes.
But it needs to be in Belgrade.
Yeah, but it would have to be in Belgrade, of course, for the town.
Right.
to be-
Right.
Yeah, and North Belgrade is sorely lacking in lake access. So that's why we're thinking of North Belgrade.
So Charlie, just out of curiosity, do you think that Seven Lakes interest, would it be from a land conservation standpoint, or would there be something else that would be driving Seven Lakes interest?
Well, we've gone through an exercise this last year of looking at our priorities, and when we do land conservation in particular, and we came up with a short list of a half a dozen characteristics. At the top of the list is buying land or protecting land in order to protect water quality. So if we see that it has a water quality benefit in some way, from our point of view, that's a big plus. That said, there's 3 or 4 other priorities. One is, wildlife habitat. Another is recreation. So the public access piece is a big, goal of ours as well. And then we look at, things like cost and risk. If it costs a lot of money and we have to raise a lot of money, we need to know that and factor that into our decision. Also, if it's at risk for development, we try to factor that into our decision as well. So, but the big 3, I would say, are water, habitat, and public recreation.
Do you think that having public access for swimming, would that be in conflict with the water quality priority?
It could be, so it would be, important to do it well.
Not, yeah, not inherently in conflict, just.
No. And, we see that as again, as a benefit, a public benefit. Public access is a big deal, and making it so that it's fair to people that live off the lake, I think is important to getting everybody in town to support lake water quality.
Well, I think maybe one of the beauties of this sort of project is that it would be focused towards benefiting people who specifically don't live on the lake.
Right.
I think that's important. So
Yeah,
that it's not us and them, it's everybody.
Yeah.
And they have more of a buy-in for the lakes and how their property, even if it's not immediately on the lake, how what they do on their property affects the lakes.
Yeah, and so that they vote for, for priorities that support the lakes, for the monies to protect the lakes annually.
But also they understand how what they do on their property affects the lakes.
Yeah, so I think it's a very good thing to be.
Okay, so what's the next step? The 3 of us
3 of us get
get
together
together?
and
Senator, talk about that motion. Ask a question. All right, can we move on?
yes. The next item of discussion is discussion of wakeful impacts on shorelines and lake bottoms.
Okay, thank you. I need to go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Charlie.
So who was it who wanted, was it you, Lenny, who wanted to discuss this in particular?
No, I was wondering who put it on the agenda.
Paul, I think.
I think it was Paul.
No?
I've received just, inquiries from neighbors and stuff on the lake about on Great Pond, they see some wake boats. What is the impact? Nothing, that was my, I don't know if I put this on, but I've had some inquiries on it. And our committee just amongst ourselves was saying, Paul might have seen some wake boats down at his end of the lake.
Well, I mean, when I saw this on here, my immediate thought was, we can talk about this as much as we want. We can be as upset as we want to be or whatever, but there's absolutely nothing we can do about it because it's a state issue. Nothing that Belgrade can, by itself, or even the consortium of towns around the lakes can do about it, other than ask our representative, Dan, and our senator, Mr. Black, to raise it in the legislature. But at least going by what's happened in other states, there's always a coalition of boat dealers and others who will rise up to oppose any changes.
Do you know if this topic has been discussed in the legislature previously, Lenny?
I do not think that it has been discussed in Maine. If it has, I haven't heard about it. It has come up in other states. I know that there's been a lot has gone on in New Hampshire. It's a much worse problem in New Hampshire than it is here, especially southern New Hampshire. And I think it has come up in the New Hampshire legislature and batted down. The last I heard, and that was a few years ago. But I haven't heard anything recently.
You know, we need to, if you're gonna take this on, the other look at ski-doos too, you know, wave hoppers.
Well, they're really very different. The problem with wake boats is literally the wake. And the problem with the ski-doos is the nuisance value.
Nuisance, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, granted, the wake boats can be a nuisance too, you know, they can be very noisy and that sort of thing. But the real problem with wake boats is that they generate these huge wakes. You know, they're a real wake boat. I don't know if you know what they actually do.
Yeah.
They actually generate so much wake that the person riding the wakeboard does not need a rope.
Right.
Right, they surf on this.
They surf on the wave generated by the boat. And so if you think about that, this thing has this huge standing wave that's generated behind the boat. And of course, that wave then just, you know, slowly dissipates. And if they're anywhere near shore at all, and if they're not like at least a 3/4 of a mile out, that wave, well, of course, it depends on the wind and so forth, but that wave eventually can break against the shore. And if that goes on and on and on, if there are lots of boats, or if the same boat just stays in the same area going around and around, you know, if that goes on, you know, month after month and then summer after summer, you just get a lot of erosion on the shore. And that, of course, has consequences for the lake, because you're just going to wash a lot of dirt into the lake as a result. Or you're going. This is a separate issue, but it's. I mean, this is an issue that a lot of people get even more upset about. Is you can do a lot of damage to property, and in fact, on our lake, because of the wake boats that are run by Camp Moden. A lot of people's docks and their boats at their docks were getting damaged. And a lot of people have, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but some people have actually purchased boat lifts, put their boats on lifts, and because of the damage from the Camp Moden wake boats. So, but.
And so Lenny, was that at all hyperbole? I mean, do they really have to be 3/4 of a mile from shore not to disturb the shore?
Well, I don't know, yeah, half mile anyway, yeah,
Really?
pretty much, yeah, I mean, it depends, there's, you know, yeah.
Are there issues with these on the other lakes? Like Jim, have you ever seen these on Long Pond or?
I don't recall seeing them in Long Pond. I've seen them in other ponds outside the Seven Lakes. Cobbessy, for instance, is a large lake. I know that there are a few of them there.
A couple of them on Great Ones.
So yeah, I spend most of my time on Long Pond, so I don't have much with grand knowledge about that.
I haven't seen many on Great Pond.
There are a couple.
Yeah, there aren't that many around, and to be fair, on salmon, the owner of Moden claims that while these boats are wake boats, they don't actually carry ballast. The thing about wake boats is that in order to generate the huge waves, they have ballast tanks where they take in water to weigh the boats down, and that's part of how they do it. And so the kids are using ropes, so the things are generating relatively small waves for wake boats. However, having said that, it's also the case that occasionally I think some of them do take in water and they have some really big waves, but not often.
And do they always stay at least 200 feet from the shore?
Oh, they're much more than 200
Okay.
feet, but with these things, even without the ballast, they need to be more than 500 feet, and really even 1,000 feet is barely enough in terms of not doing much damage.
Especially in narrow lakes like Long Pond.
So.
You really can't get.
Anyway, yeah, I mean, these are boats that are, the hulls are specifically designed to generate waves.
Yeah.
So,
Charlie, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, two things. You asked about other lakes. They do use them on East Pond because there's some camps there. And there was a concern by residents last year that we took a look at because they were afraid the wake boats might be stirring up sediments and would make the alum treatment ineffective faster than it might be. So we went out there. Danielle Wayne did, the person that runs our water quality programs, and she had a device to measure the amount of turbulence under the water, and found that for the most part, it went down about 6 feet, but not 15 or 20 feet, which would have stirred up the alum treatment. So that was good news, is that the turbulence generated by these boats does not appear to go much deeper than about 6 feet. But to Lenny's point, I have heard about, waves, particularly on salmon. People have talked about it. East Pond might be a little bit bigger, so the camps may be able to stay closer to the center of the lake and be further away from the shore. So when they generate these big waves, it doesn't bother as many people as it does on salmon. I've heard, quite a few reports of people like Lenny was saying, of finding the wake boats on salmon, particularly, difficult to deal with. Let's put it that way. So, Lenny, by and large, are they abiding by keeping it 500 feet offshore the boats, or are they coming much closer?
No, they don't come closer. They're a good 500 feet offshore, but it's still a problem.
I know Maine Lakes, the organization that does advocacy down in Augusta, with the legislature, has talked about trying to increase the distance from the shore for these kind of boats, or at least looked into the possibility. And they've had discussions among the statewide lake groups on the topic. And some people have suggested as much as 500 feet or more, but it's not something that I believe has been taken up by the legislature before.
I would think, now, as I mentioned, that on our lake, they don't have ballast in the tanks. Having said that, they also run with 5 or 7 campers in them, so they're pretty well weighted down. 5 or 7 campers plus the driver. The boats are fairly heavy, and so they're generating a pretty good wake. So 500 feet is not enough. Especially on a fairly calm day when there's not a lot of wind, and so there aren't cross waves. You get a good wave movement, it'll just keep on going. And 500 feet is not very far. You'd be surprised how close to shore that really is.
If people ignoring the 200-foot rule.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah, sure.
So it's gonna be another problem for enforcement. Like, so shoot them.
But I don't know if you heard what I said, you alluded to the fact that Maine Lakes is down there talking to the legislature. There's not really a whole lot we can do about it. It's very much an issue for the legislature, and of course then the governor ultimately.
And
It is an issue, I think, for DEP if it's causing shoreline erosion. One of the things which is a totally off topic, one of the things that we've been dealing with as well, again on North Pond, is somebody's been bringing their horses into the lake. And so, there's nothing against bringing a horse into the lake, but if you're trampling shoreline and causing erosion, then it may be something that is under shoreline jurisdiction. So I don't think there's nothing that we can do from, and if it's causing problems, it may be something that can be addressed.
Yeah, well, sure, and certainly in the case of salmon, the fact that people's boats are being damaged at their docks is pretty indicative, pretty much indicative of the fact that it's causing shoreline erosion.
And if you have to spend $5,000 on a boat lift, that's a direct impact.
Several people who have done that, yep.
So, go ahead, Mike.
No, I'm one of the people.
Oh, so Lenny, do you know, has DEP ever been contacted about the situation on salmon? That you know of?
No, not that I know of. No.
It seems like there's a possibility that the injured party should really just take a legal action against the known
Yeah.
perpetrator. I mean, this is not necessarily a municipal issue if you have.
Yeah. But it's also an enforcement issue. It's, there is statute that is pretty clear, IFNW, or I think it's IFNW. Watercraft statute that prohibits that sort of thing.
Prohibits causing
Yeah.
damage
Yes,
by
damage,
creating a wake.
yes.
I wonder if that's widely known among the membership of your lake association, Lenny.
I don't know.
Because that's a good point. Maybe that is the best avenue for.
Yeah, well, the question is, whether, you have to prove who it was that actually did it.
Well, if there's
One
a
of those things,
business,
can you catch them in the act sort of thing, but,
seems like it could be done.
yeah.
I'm no lawyer, but I did take an environmental law course, and they stressed to us that in environmental law, the easiest case to make and the easiest case to win is one of bringing a nuisance and an environmental nuisance. And all you have to do is demonstrate that you were there before the nuisance, so that you didn't move to the nuisance. And if there's a damage that's created by that nuisance, it's not a very difficult case to win.
I see, okay, interesting, all right. Interesting.
Well, here in our community, there's a fellow named Rich Baker who used to be in charge of the shoreland unit of DEP. So maybe I'll reach out to Rich to see if he thinks that whether or not contacting DEP would be of value.
Excellent, thank you for doing that.
I know on the horse issue, there isn't a regulation specifically that allows, somebody to intervene in the case, because in that case, the town of Smithfield CEO brought it to the attention of DEP. But that said, from an erosion point of view, DEP would have a direct, reason to be involved. From a property damage, I know the game warden's been contacted before on this, speaking about IFNW, and I don't believe it's gone very far in terms of any change. May have changed behavior by the camp, but it didn't stop it.
That's correct, I'm familiar with that.
And I suppose a nicely worded letter.
Oh, hopeless. You're wasting the paper, you're wasting your time and the paper you're putting it on.
Maybe
That's been done multiple times to no effect whatsoever.
So it looks like we have one avenue with Anthony suggesting contacting Rich Baker to see what Rich says.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll do that. And Rich is always real responsive. So we'll see what he says. And when I get a reply back, I'll report it to the group and to you, Charlie.
Any more discussion on?
Let me ask, if he, suppose he comes back and he says, oh, yes, you can report that, then what?
Well, then
You
I
go to
think,
the individual and say, report it?
no, I think what I would do then is contact DEP and say, hey, we've got this concern, and we were advised that contacting you would be the best avenue to resolve the issue. And and if they say, well, we're gonna have to hear from individual property owners, then I'd impose upon the president of the Salmon Lake Association
McGraw Pond Sound.
Yeah. To
See if I can
help,
find out who that is.
yeah, to help spread the word that, hey, if you've got a grievance, the DEP wants
Okay,
to know about
very good. We will do that. That's right. Then we can get organized on that for next summer when those votes are out again.
I suppose they're done for the.
Oh, they've been done since about, yeah, they've been done for weeks. You know, they finished up around the 10th of August.
Okay.
Most of the camps do.
Yeah.
Any more on wake boats? If not, the discussion of the October agenda. This afternoon, I sent out an email that George Seal had put together regarding the joint meeting and kind of the steps we may take to do that. I emailed everybody a copy of his suggestions, and I've got copies here. But he advocates kind of looking into three things. The participants would be our committee, planning board, and possibly the select board, and with participation by Seven Lakes Alliance staff for the scientific and some of the water quality issues. But his basic premise is to educate the members of those three boards as to the current state of water quality in Great Pond and Salmon and McGraw Lake, and what is known about the sources, phosphorus and other nutrient loading responsible for their water, and what are the water quality trends. Feels we need to have a common baseline of understanding of what's happening in these lakes. And each one of our committees has a different role. We need to define that. He recommended that we break up the presentations into two rather than try to, put a 4 or 5 hour session together. One would be on the status of the Great Long Pond management plans, what they propose to do, and where they stand with that. That would be probably a logical first meeting. And the second one on Salmon McGraw, where are they at, their water quality management plans and so forth. And after that, we should have a lot more baseline information so we could move ahead and figure out what we want to do. Basically, we don't want to keep driving ahead to know we have a base of information, who's going to be looking at what, and what role does our committee have in particular going forward. So he asked, George asked myself and Peter Rushton, head of the planning board, to get back to him if they're in agreement with this kind of a means going forward.
So Pat, are you thinking then that perhaps our October meeting is a joint meeting that would address
One of
the two
Yes, probably.
watershed surveys?
Yes, and that would give us time to get Seven Lakes staff involved and anybody else, and put an agenda and goals and objectives of that meeting. And so we could be part of that and determine what role we have. But I think it's going to be very helpful to see what's going on, where the trends are. We know a lot of that already, but I think having it all in one spot will be very helpful for us. And then we could move on to Salmon McGraw. And after that, we'll see where we go with it. But
I think it's a good idea to break it down. I think that's.
I mean, you mentioned that the first time.
Yeah, because it's easy to absorb it all.
Yeah.
Small chunk.
So you have that, you have George's email to you today, so you can look at it and get back to me with any comments. And then I can respond to George Seal. Yeah, we'd like to do it, as he's outlined for us. He's a good quarterback for this because he's got a career DEP, as we saw from his meeting with us last week. He's got a wealth of knowledge on the lakes, and he's comprehensive plan chair, review committee. He's on the planning board, so.
Lake surveys were a product of Seven Lakes, am I correct?
Yeah.
What will the other groups have to? They just.
Well, the planning board will probably look at it from from their view, which is different than, say, our view.
Have they looked at it?
Well, I think from a couple of different ways is our land use ordinances, whether they be the subdivision ordinance, the commercial development review ordinance, or even the shoreline zoning ordinance, which is based largely on statute, but does allow for some modifications to suit local needs, whether or not those adequately address the issue of water quality and runoff into the lakes. So from the planning board's perspective, I think that's sort of where they come into play. And then, of course, the comprehensive plan committee are just looking at, I mean, there's portions of the plan that speak specifically to water quality and preserving and protecting the lakes, whether or not the recommendations and findings in the comprehensive plan are being met.
Exactly.
What I
You go ahead.
was asking. I can't get rid of this damn word. What I was asking is, will the other groups, I know they have interest, they all have interest in the subject matter. Will they have something to contribute, or are they coming primarily to hear about those surveys?
So will they contribute to the conversation that night?
Or I mean, they have something to bring, or are they just gonna comment like, on what they hear? In other words, is it primarily a meeting to hear what?
I think so if I put myself in the shoes of a planning board member, I think it's just gonna be instructive to them. It'll help inform their work. And maybe what they'll learn is, geez, we don't have enough safeguards in our commercial development review ordinance to ensure that we're doing all that we can to control erosion and runoff into the lake.
That was what I was getting
Yeah.
at, my question.
And so from a planning board perspective, Mike, the way I see it is, they might be enlightened to necessary changes in our land use ordinances to help with the issue of water quality.
One thing I've always, had a question about is, in the shoreline zone, there's a fairly prescribed way you can do thinning of trees,
Mhm.
in that 100-foot buffer. It's fairly complex. You've got a point system, and it says they have to meet that. But I don't know if we've actually had our code enforcement officer, or anybody code enforcement officer, confirm they met it. By looking at it themselves before, deciding what can be cut and trimmed, and coming back and see if it was done that way.
Yeah, and so I will tell you, Pat, that I know that Gary does often get called to come take a look at trees that a property owner in the shoreline zone wants to remove. Now, I'm sure that there are also instances of people taking down trees without asking first.
Yeah.
I cannot speak to whether or not he goes back to confirm whether or not this tree, that tree, and this tree that were approved for removal were actually the ones that were removed and no others were. I can't speak to that.
Right, and then it's not only the big trees, it's the lower ones
Right.
at different levels. It's kind of a
Yeah.
layered down.
I will tell you guys, his experience after the microburst, where a lot of people were really interested in taking down trees after that. I mean, my feeling is, to some extent, that was a bit of a fool's errand, because no one knows which trees are gonna come down during the next storm. And you're just sort of guessing at that point, but.
Now, can I ask a question here? And I have an opinion, but I don't know what yours might be. For non-complying lots that are grandfathered, lots that didn't go before the planning board for approval, do they have to meet the point system? Because my understanding was that was for new developments going before a planning board for approval. But if someone has grandfathered rights as to the trees on their property, they don't need to meet a point system, because if those points were never there, then they are required to attain them.
I don't know if that's so, because your grandfather rights apply to your land right now, the way it is now. You want to change it, depending on what the change is, you may have to get a permit, or at least stay within the requirements.
Yes, and Mike's correct about that. So for instance, Mike has a camp
Right.
that is too close to the water if it were being built today.
Right.
So, and so if he were gonna make any modifications to that camp, he would have to get permitting approval for that.
Right.
And so, so he's right. So simply because you have a lot that was already developed, doesn't mean that you can then just take down whatever tree that you want. You still have to go through that process.
Well, okay, this isn't the conversation for this meeting, I guess. But my understanding is if you're not expanding your camp and you have a tree that was 1 foot tall 20 years ago, and now is 20 feet tall, and perhaps presents a threat in the case of falling, that you still have a grandfather right to maintain the property as it was without going back to the planning board for further assistance, for the permit, because you're not permitting a building at this point.
I don't know, I don't think that's correct, but let me confirm that, Jim,
You're gonna measure
and I'll get
DBH.
back with you.
You're gonna measure the size of the trunk DBH, and you can under, I think it's 4 inches, you can cut without a permit. Over 4 inches, you need a permit, or at least you need this.
Well, I know that's true for new permits, for new construction,
Yeah.
that you have to maintain it. You know, if you're cutting timber in order to develop a lot, you have to maintain a certain score. The question is, if you have a grandfather lot where trees grow up over time, do you still have to maintain a score even though you never maintained it in the past because the trees weren't there?
It is what it is at the time you want to make a change. If it was if you had a lawn there and you had a lawn now, you're not required to put trees in, but if you had a lawn 20 years ago, and now it's, well, you've got a stand of trees of different sizes, that's your existing condition is one, right? At the time you asked for a change, because the property's changed. That's the way I read I read the shoreline zoning.
And I think Pat's right about that, but again, Rich Baker would be another good
Yeah.
source for that.
Right.
Rich actually wrote the shoreline statute in its original form.
Oh, really? Yeah. You've been around a while.
Yes.
These are wealth of information and knowledge.
Who is it that works with our appeals board? To help them? Is it Jay or somebody else? I was gonna say, because a lot of that, what we're talking about is appeals board stuff. Planning board stuff.
So I would say our most knowledgeable appeals board member is Dick Warren.
Maybe somebody might want to talk to us.
On George Seal's request, for how we're gonna move forward.
Mhm.
You wanna have a chance to weigh in on this and read it a little bit, and then get back to me, and because George is asking how he wants to proceed with several meetings broken up into topics.
I
Is
think
the way to go.
he started out pretty well.
He started out well, and
Breaking down the information is easy way to learn. Also, the idea of having a DEP biologist.
doing DEP there too, so it could be productive.
Yeah, I've read it, and I think it's a good approach. I don't know that we should vote for it one way or the other until people have had time to consider that, but I support that approach.
Were no members online tonight, is that correct?
I'm sorry, that is-
No members online tonight?
No members were online, just Charlie.
All
right.
He's with Seven Lakes Alliance.
I don't know
He's in land acquisition management. Chief of that.
Charlie, I think we're signing off, sir. Thanks for joining us.
that. No, I didn't know.